As a spa professional, if you're looking to create a stellar customer service experience, then your intake process is going to be crucial. In this video, I'm going to be diving into my process, common mistakes I see other spa professionals, massage therapists, and estheticians making when it comes to their intake process, and then also some tools to get you started. By the way, if you're new here, my name's Ayana. I'm a licensed massage therapist, esthetician, and spa owner, and I make videos all things concerning spa business strategy. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you. Now let's dive into the video. So let's first talk about what is your client intake. Your intake process is typically a list of questions that you ask your client to learn more about them, their health history, and most importantly, their expectations and goals for the session. So your intake process is going to vary depending on the type of work that you do, but as a standard, you are trying to collect the health information, medical records, anything that concerns the client's previous sessions, things like that. Again, it's going to vary. Now, another thing is in most states, this process is required. It is required that you have some type of documentation that you worked with a client, whether that's through your intake and your SOAP notes. SOAP notes are the notes that you take after you complete a session, but most of the time you are required to create a client intake. You're going to want to check with your board of massage about what is required when it comes to your intake process. The reason why the intake process is so important is because number one, it's usually one of the first impressions that you'll have with your client, especially new clients. This is when you are seeing their name for the first time. You're often seeing if they've had any health issues or anything to be concerned about. This is also where you will notice if there's any contraindications for the session. So your intake process is going to be really important when it comes to making informed decisions about how you want to go about your client's treatment plan, how you want to go about the session. And usually for a new client, you are verbally going over the intake with them to determine how you want to do the session. Now, there are two types of intake. So when we talk about intake, we're going to be talking about the verbal intake. I'll also give you an examples of what my intake process might sound like for my business. And then also we have documented intake. So documented intake is what is actually going to be on paper, what's going to be on file. This is your record. And usually you want to keep your records for at least 6 years, and oftentimes you'll want to renew the intake form after 6 to 12 months. Again, that could be required based on the state that you're in, so you want to check with your board of massage about that. But I usually renew any client intake after 12 months of someone being a client with me, just to see if there's any changes. And typically after a couple weeks of working with the same client, you can verbally ask them, has there been any changes in your medical history, things like that. It's really important that you never skip your intake process, especially with new clients. You don't want to do a session and realize that, oh, this client is allergic to the type of oil that I'm using or the type of scents that I have in the spa. This is really where you gather anything about allergies, about medical issues, any type of concerns, things like that. All right, so let's talk about the ways to take intake. So there are two ways to get intake. The first way is a digital intake form. Now this can manifest in a variety of different ways. This can be a form on your website. It can be some type of software you use to collect information. This can also be a PDF on an iPad. That is technically digital because it's on your iPad or on your mobile device. So there's a lot of different ways to take digital intake. I'm gonna give you some examples of tools later in the video, but that is the first way that you take intake. The pros of having a digital intake process is that it's stored online. Oftentimes different software will have tools to encrypt it so that no one can break into your records. Also, you don't have to worry about paper filing or trying to find someone's intake, especially if you have it in a secure place. And also it's easy. It's easy to use if you do a digital intake process. Again, you don't have to worry about looking for paper files. You don't have to worry about copying things to your copying machine or printing anything out or anything like that. Another thing with digital intake is there are often capabilities where you can send this to your client before your session, before you even see them. So that takes some time. So when you do it like that, you're able to save time when you actually meet them during the session. The second type of intake is a written intake. So this is going to be your traditional pen and paper paper intake form. It's going to be very similar to digital intake in terms of the questions that are asked or the types of information that you are requesting from your client. But again, you are filing this in a secure place and it's a physical copy. When it comes to your digital intake, I would recommend a tool that I use called Jotforms. I'll leave a link down below to where you can get Jotforms for yourself. You can create your own intake form, you can customize it, you can add your branding. I used it free for a while, but then I went ahead and got the paid version of it so that it can be almost private label, so I can use my own branding. I don't have to show Jotforms branding, and it just creates a more professional look. Another option for you is if you still like the digital intake process, but you don't want to fool with getting online and using that technology and building out an intake form. Another tool that you can use is just creating a PDF via Canva or on your own and putting it on your iPad. That's another form of digital intake. I also offer this. I'll leave the link down below and show you examples of what that could look like. The main benefit of using something like an iPad or a tablet to have your PDF intake form is that you can also create your own soap notes directly onto it. So you can hand this off to your client for them to fill out their intake, and then you can also add in your treatment plan, fill that out, all that good stuff. I always recommend treatment plans. That's one of the best ways that I sell things like massage packages and things like that. So that is just another option for you. One thing I will say about written intake, if you decide to go the traditional route and print out PDF forms or you print out your own form that is customized to you, is that you'll want to request that your client comes in at least 10 to 15 minutes early to, number one, use the restroom, get acquainted, and then also fill out this intake form. So just keep that in mind if you are deciding to print out intake forms, and you can do it that way. So let's talk about the questions that you might want to have on an intake form. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my intake form. 1 second. As I mentioned before, one of the ways that I do intake is right here on this iPad. So let me open this up and show you what this looks like. All right, so this is what it looks like when a client is filling out their intake. Again, all you would need to do is take whatever, it doesn't have to be an iPad. You can have them fill this out. So this asks them for their name, date of birth, of course. You're also gonna ask for their address, city, state, email. Email is very, very important. When you ask them for their email, you're able to use their email for marketing purposes. You might wanna add that disclaimer when they're filling this out to get their permission to do that. And then also, you're gonna ask, how did you hear about us? That is a very, very important intake question because that will help you determine where is your client actually finding you. So what is your main lead source? It could be Instagram, it could be Google, it could be Facebook, it could be word of mouth. You also wanna ask them if they were referred to you and who that referral was from so that you know who to thank for the referral. Those are the main intake form questions. Of course, it's gonna be their name and just, basic information that you might want to have for your client, especially their emergency contact number. Next, you're going to ask them basic questions about their health history. So some of the things that are included on here, and you may want to customize this based on the type of massage you do. The more niche of a service that you offer, the more likely you're able to customize this for your needs. So for example, in my niche, I do post-op lymphatic drainage massage for women who are recovering from cosmetic surgery. So in that case, I may ask them things like, do you experience tingling? Do you experience numbness? Those are some things that I could add on my intake form. I'll also leave a link down below to, standard intake form questions written by the AMTA, the American Massage Therapy Association, that will help you get some ideas of what type of questions you may want to add on your intake form, right? So some things might be, do you have hypertension? Any type of thing that has to do with the skin, any type of skin issues. Again, I'll leave some examples of different questions that you can ask or what types of conditions that you may want to include. And of course, are you taking any medication? Because you want to make sure there's no medications. That is a contraindication for the type of session that you are offering. For example, if you're doing pregnancy massage, and that's another question that you would want to have on your intake form always is, are you currently pregnant? If so, Often you want to ask how many weeks, because there is a standard, varies depending on how you were taught, but if you are usually within the first 4 weeks of getting pregnant, massage is a contraindication. Or if you see that they're pregnant and let's say there's a certain aromatherapy oil that you use, you can determine if that's a contraindication. Again, it's going to vary based on the type of massage that you do. And then you can add your own custom intake form questions. For example, are you heat sensitive? That would let you know if you're going to be doing hot stones or not, or if you're going to be using towels and things like that. You can add your own custom intake form question, again, to enhance the experience for your clients, and then also to determine if massage is really right for them. Other questions that you may want to ask is, what are your goals for the session? So it's really important to understand expectations. Really, this is a question that you can either put in your intake form or you can go over this verbally, but it's great to see in your client's own words what it is that their expectations are, so that you can see if, first of all, if they're a good fit for you and if you're able to meet those expectations. Other things, another really powerful thing to have on your intake form is going to be an image similar to this. So hopefully you can see this right here. This is where you will have your client themselves. They can write on this. Let's see here. Right now I'm using a tool called Notability. You can also use a tool called GoodNotes in order to put PDFs like this on your iPad or tablet and be able to write on it. And then you can have your client themselves. They can actually write on this and determine what areas of the body that they really want worked on. They can circle, but again, even when you're doing your verbal intake, you can have them literally point to the area that they're really concerned about having treatment. Another thing that I put on my intake form, or especially what was popular back in 2020, 2021, even 2022, is if you've been exposed to COVID in the past 14 days, or if you've had any of these symptoms, so fever 1 or higher, shortness of breath, unexplained body aches, loss of taste or smell, coughing or sore throat, or none of the above. So that's usually kind of like a COVID waiver, just to see if you could possibly be exposed to something like COVID. If you do want access to a form like this, I will have it in the description box below, where you can purchase this and you can customize it to your own branding and change some of the questions to the way you would want it. And again, as I mentioned before, you can have it just one sheet where you're able to put your treatment plan. So this is going to be the treatment plan, and then you can put in your own soap notes as well. So let's talk about informed consent. Informed consent has to be on your intake form, and let me explain what this is. So when you're a massage therapist, or really any type of spa professional where you are touching the body, you need to get informed consent to just show and document that your client is consenting to have body work done. They're consenting to have treatment done, and they're also saying that they have given you accurate and fully disclosed their health information, so that you have it documented that they told you everything that you need to know about their health conditions and things that they are currently experiencing right now. Let me read you this definition of informed consent directly from the AMTA website. This says, informed consent is a process by which a fully informed client consents to participate in massage treatment. It originates from the ethical and legal right of the client to direct what happens to his or her body, from the ethical duty of the therapist to involve the client in choices related to his wellness. So a typical informed consent statement would sound something like this. I am informed that I have the right to terminate the treatment at any time and the right to alter the therapist's pressure during the massage treatment. I am aware that there are further alternatives such as chiropractic, acupuncture, reflexology, physiotherapy. I have read the above consent. So again, another form of informed consent is also showing you, for example, through that image that I just showed you, indicating what areas of the body is okay to treat. And also it's very important to get a signature with this, just to show that the client has read this, they understand, and again, they're giving you informed consent to do treatment on their body, and they're also disclosing that they gave you all the information that you need in order to make an informed decision about continuing with massage therapy treatment. Now, the difference between informed consent and implied consent is implied consent implies, it's not explicit, but implies that the client is looking for massage therapy or bodywork services. And so implied consent is really just a client, maybe they book with you on your website, or they call called you asking about massage, that implies that they are looking for treatment. But again, you always want to get informed consent, and that's going to be in written form, whether that's digitally or on an actual paper form that they sign. Before we move on to what my intake process looks like, let me know in the comments, what is your intake form process? What tips would you give other massage therapists or estheticians about their intake process? So let's dive right in. All right, so a typical intake process for me, let me show you an example. Again, there are two ways to get intake. I just showed you one way, which is digitally, for example, on an iPad, but also I did recommend a tool called Jotforms. Again, I'll put the link down below to where you can get Jotforms, and I can also have them fill out this when they get to their session or before their session. Again, because Jotform does offer links to where they can fill out their intake form. So it may look like this, of course, asking for their first name, last name, email address, how did you hear about us, all that good stuff. So we already covered that. And this brings up another point. Another thing that you may want to have on your intake form is photo consent. So in my business, I take a lot of photos. I do a lot of before and afters for the type of work that I do. So if you do work like that, maybe you're an esthetician, you do before and afters, things like that, you can put your cancellation policy in your intake form. That can be very important, and let them know, what could happen if they no show or if they show up late. I have a whole video about your policies that you may want to check out if you're watching this, to watch after this video. All right, now we're gonna role play the intake process for your clients. So I'm just imagining what I do when I'm working with clients. I work with a lot of lymphatic drainage clients, so my intake process is gonna look a lot different than your intake process. Bear with me. And okay, so let's set the scene. You have your client waiting in the lobby while you're dressing up your table and disinfecting everything. And once you're finished with that and you've washed your hands and all that good stuff, you go out and you greet your client. You try to state their name and make sure that you're pronouncing it correctly. Allow them to correct you if you didn't, pronounce their name. And if you're unsure of how to pronounce their name, you can always address them by their last name and then just ask them straight up, how do you pronounce your name? And then you would introduce yourself and say, hi, my name is Ayana. I'm gonna be working with you today. Or you can say, I am going to be taking care of you today. Do you have to use the restroom before your session? If they say no, then go ahead and guide them to the room. Say, okay, now you can follow me. So it's really important that you are verbal throughout this process, because it's just really important that you offer really clear directions. I talked about this in my Steal My Scripts that I use with my clients video. And that video was very straightforward, telling you the exact phrases that I use. So definitely check that out as well. You ask them to follow you back to the room, and now you're gonna go over their intake. So I would verbally say, okay, I have your intake form right here. I'm just gonna go over it with you briefly, make sure I have all the information I need before we get started. They're gonna say, okay. All right, so I see here that you had surgery about 2 weeks ago. You're about 2 weeks post-op. I would just confirm that their last massage session was about a week ago. I may ask them how that went. This is also my opportunity to look at the type of medications that they're on. If I'm unfamiliar with any type of medication that they are talking about, I may ask them, what do you use this medication for? For example, if they use a medication for high blood pressure, then that would tell me something. That would let me know, okay, you can make the decision if you would continue that session or not. Just depends. Again, when it comes to health history, it's so varied. So this is your opportunity to go over any contraindications that you may see on the intake form. One of the questions I ask is, have you received professional massage before? If they say no, then that lets me know that I need to be a lot more specific about my instructions. For example, when I ask them to be face down, I might not say, be prone on the table, because your client doesn't speak like that. They may not know what that means. I may say you'll be facing the floor, but on the table, or you're gonna be under these two sheets. I'm just gonna make things a lot more straightforward, and I'm gonna speak in layman terms if they've never had a massage before. I would probably also remind them, especially if they filled out a photo consent form, I'd let them know, okay, I'm gonna be taking photos before and after. And then again, just walking them through each step of the process. I think a good complement to even what I'm saying right now is that scripts video, so you can can see more in depth, you'll want to go over their expectations. So if on your intake form you ask them about their expectations for massage, this is where you would go over those expectations. So for example, if they requested deep tissue, but you don't offer deep tissue, or they didn't sign up for a deep tissue session, then you could say, hey, I noticed that you requested deep tissue. I do have that service, but it is an extra charge, or it would be this price. Is that okay with you? Or if they requested, let's say, a 90-minute session, or they requested so many different things, but they only booked a 60-minute session, and you see you have extra time in your schedule to offer a 90-minute session, then that's your opportunity to bring that up. So again, you want to use some critical thinking skills when it comes to your intake process. If you see something on the intake that doesn't really match what the session is, that is your opportunity to make suggestions and bring things up. And usually your client will appreciate you for that. Now I'm going to go into more tips when it comes to your intake. These are a lot of things that I find that massage therapists will skip, especially when they're working with a client for the first time. And I don't want you to skip these steps, so definitely pay attention. So your intake process does not have to be, oh, I see you're on XYZ medication. Tell me why you're taking that medication, or anything like that. It doesn't have to be straightforward, just asking them about their health history. It could be nonverbal things, like noticing your client's gait when they're walking through the door. So if you notice that your client, let's say they walk with a limp, then that might inform you of how you would do the session. Or you notice that one shoulder is higher than the other. That would let you know where you're going to be mostly focusing a lot of your attention on. Again, you want to match whatever you think your treatment plan is with what they said in their form. In the past, I've had clients, especially thinking back to when I worked at a spa, sometimes I'd had clients who they knew that they had like a lot of tension in a particular area. They made it very, very clear that they did not want to have really deep tissue, or they don't want someone to just focus on one area or one problem that they know that they have. They want to do a relaxation massage. So that's another thing that you want to keep in mind. So you can notice, imbalances in their muscles, how they're holding their body, where they hold their tension, and also pay attention to the questions or the answers that they give you when you ask them open-ended questions. All right, so final thoughts. So now that you know more about your intake process and you understand how to do a thorough intake, the last things I want to leave you with is just try to do your best to do some critical thinking. Again, this is your opportunity to make suggestions to the client. This is your opportunity to really listen to what they say that their struggles are and really speak to that when you're doing the session. This is also your opportunity to set your own expectations for the session. So oftentimes, this is my opportunity to let them know to silence their phones or what I plan to do during the session. Again, it's going to vary based on the type of massage that you do or the type of work that you do, but I really hope that this got you started. If you want to learn more about what you're doing in the treatment room, definitely check out this next video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.